Okay, now I'd like to talk about lighting in this video. To preview, right now we have this default light set that is in the scene. To be able to preview what the scene will look like with lights added, I am going to want to change the shading view in my viewport. I'm going to want to change the lighting, excuse me. I'm going to want to use all lights, which is number 7 here is the hotkey. When I do that, everything turns kind of black. There are no lights in the scene. Under shading, you'll see that there are other numbers that correlate to different properties here. And let me just tell you those hotkeys. If I hit 6 on my keyboard, that doesn't show me lighting, but it shows me textures. I don't have any textures yet. 5 is just shaded display mode, so we can work in 5. 4 shows us a wireframe. 3 gives us, and then 3, 2, and 1 are different buttons that are important for poly modeling. But for now, let's hit 7 on our keyboard and 5 for shaded mode and 7 to use lighting. And now let's start to add some lights into the scene. If I went to render this scene, this is what it would look like. The background would be black, the objects would be black, and so there would be nothing in it. So let's add some lights. The first light I'm going to add is a directional light. What a directional light does is it applies, and because my scene is so large, let me turn up the scale of my light so I can see it better. What a directional light does is it floods light in a single direction, almost like the sun. So it'll provide a kind of endless light to the scene within this particular direction. For this light object, I'm able to rotate it to change the direction that the light is working. It doesn't matter where I place the light in the scene, the direction light will flood the entire scene with light within that one direction. Here again, I have my pivot, and maybe if I want to move this light up just to show you, I'll go back to my tool settings and change my axis orientation to world and move this pivot up. And so basically what I've just done is I've changed, the axes will change depending, if I've rotated an object, the object itself, all objects have their own inherent origin and direction. This object, for example, that was created and turned 180, the Y in the positive is going down. In this instance of the light, it's pointing, the up value of this directional light is now, it's diverting from the world space. So we have here under the tool settings, and I can get to these tool settings again by double clicking or by hitting this icon here. But I'm able to change the orientation of that axis by choosing object, world, or component. So go back to world, and now we have the axes that correlate to the world space. So it doesn't matter where in the world this is, depending on its direction, it will shine light. So while we're talking about lighting, I'd also like to talk about rendering at the same time. And I want to show you these icons again at the top, which correlate to different render options. This first one's our render view, and this one here is our render settings. Let's go to the render settings first. I've already adjusted this, but we have a place where we put our file name under our render settings. We have the image format. So this is all the file output. So if we were to export our render, we would carry over these specifications, that it's a JPEG and that its file name is demo. We can also see that it was going to save this into our images folder within our project folder. And then below here, I have my renderable camera. I'm using my perspective camera. And then below that, we have the image size. The default here would be HD 540, but I want you to change that to HD 720. The default here also is this EXR, and we want it to be JPEG. So you can just choose that from the drop-down menu. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit close. Oh, the last thing I want to show you here with the render settings is that we are rendering using Arnold, and that's important. We don't want to use Maya software or hardware. We want to render this particular project with Arnold. This is all under the Common tab of our render settings. We also have an Arnold tab next to it, and this is some specific ways that the render is going to process things like the specular of those highlights or the diffuse value. If there is transparency, how that light goes through the material with transmission. We have subsurface scattering and volume indirect, which has to do with like volumetric properties or objects. You don't have to worry about that. So I can show you how to adjust these to adjust for things like noise in your renders in the next video. But for now, those are our render settings. Let me go ahead and close those, and let's go ahead and render the scene. And with my render view, I go ahead and hit this clapboard, and our scene will start to render. And already you can see that as it's coming in, it's very dark. And the reason is that these being Maya lights and not Arnold lights, they have a different property value that we need to adjust for. But you can see here that our render, and this is what your images will, your image renders will start to look like.